Have you ever been betrayed by something you believed in? The 1918 Nobel Prize in Chemistry became one of the most controversial in history. The recipient was the German chemist Fritz Haber. He discovered that he could create certain amazing things out of air, and he made a great contribution to mankind. It's astonishing to think that without him, half of the 8 billion people on Earth today might not exist. Both you and your loved ones owe your lives to his achievements. He is a hero who changed the future of humanity, but at the same time, his invention caused the deaths of millions of people. And he didn't care how painful a soldier's death might be. Today, let's talk about the genius chemist Fritz Haber. He had two faces, conducting experiments of life and death, exterminating many lives, yet also sustaining them even now. What was the sad loyalty and obsession with science that he carried? And what was the fate of his wife, who wished he wouldn't create chemical weapons? Let's unravel the story of this single genius scientist. Fritz Haber was born in 1868 into a German Jewish family. His father was a successful businessman, dealing in imports like dyes, and perhaps due to his father's influence, Fritz had a penchant for chemistry from a young age. He attended a primary school where Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish students could learn equally. Afterward, he pursued his studies at top-tier universities in Europe, which have produced as many as 55 Nobel laureates. He attended Berlin's Humboldt University, Heidelberg University, and later the Berlin Institute of Technology, dedicating himself to his studies. After graduating from university, he began working in the chemical company run by his father. Fritz's father said, "Son, to become a successful businessman, you need to learn sales and practical skills." However, Fritz strongly disagreed, saying, "No, I don't think this method suits me." His father insisted, "You must listen to me." But they clashed, and one day, Fritz suggested to his father that they should invest in a certain chemical product, promising substantial profits. However, this decision led to significant losses. At that point, his father gave up on the idea of entrusting the business to his son, saying, "You should have stayed in university." Afterwards, Fritz became deeply engrossed in research at the university. To secure a better position in society, he made the decision to convert from Judaism to Christianity. In the late 19th century, German society was filled with prejudice against Jews, and being a Jewish person often hindered one's academic and military advancement. Therefore, he chose to assimilate into German society by changing his religion. Fritz, born as a Jew, strongly held the belief, "I am a German." And he had a profound sense of patriotism. Interestingly, his friend Albert Einstein, who was also born Jewish and lived in the same era and environment, took the opposite stance. Einstein chose not to convert and maintained a strong Jewish identity throughout his life, having experienced anti-Semitism in Germany. In 1909, Fritz Haber achieved a groundbreaking invention that would greatly alter the course of human history, the synthesis of ammonia. He created that pungent ammonia. You might wonder what on earth it was used for. This invention is often considered one of the most important of the 20th century, and it's no exaggeration to say that we owe our lives today to it. In the 19th century, the world saw a rapid increase in population thanks to advancements in industrial science. As the population grew, a pressing problem emerged: there wasn't enough food to feed everyone. Scientists of the time believed that humanity would face famine once the world's population reached 1.5 billion. The biggest challenge for humanity at that time was how to provide enough food. To produce more food, it was necessary to provide more nitrogen to the fields. Nitrogen is abundant in the air, but at that time, there was no way to extract it from the atmosphere. So, people had to import bird droppings, primarily collected from places like South America, and spread them on the fields as fertilizer. Imagine the effort it took to gather bird droppings and import them just to fertilize the fields. It was an arduous process. Bird droppings became a highly prized commodity, and countries were competing fiercely to secure them, even leading to conflicts in South America. Then came Fritz Haber. This genius discovered a method to convert the nitrogen in the air, which makes up 79% of the atmosphere, into a compound that could be used as fertilizer. He achieved this by using nitrogen and hydrogen to synthesize ammonia. This discovery, along with the large-scale production of ammonia realized by another individual named Bosch, became known as the Haber-Bosch process. Fritz Haber's breakthrough was celebrated as the invention that could make bread from the air, and it's considered one of the greatest inventions of the 20th century. Even today, 1% of the world's population uses the Haber-Bosch process, producing 175 million tons of ammonia annually. Before Fritz's invention, it was predicted that the world's population would peak at 1.5 billion and then face famine. However, thanks to his invention, the current world population stands at around 8 billion. You can see just how remarkable Fritz Haber's invention was. Approximately 10 years after this groundbreaking discovery, in 1918, Fritz Haber was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in recognition of his achievements. However, during the award ceremony, Haber was isolated. Handshakes were refused, and people scorned him, wondering why such a seemingly diabolical person had come to receive the prize. In reality, Fritz had another dark side. He was a fervent patriot and a militarist who took pride in being a German national. During World War I, he worked on various military technologies, with a particular focus on the development of chemical weapons. In 1914, he joined 93 German intellectuals in signing a notorious manifesto. He supported Germany's position, legitimacy, and the war itself in protest of what they saw as false accusations tarnishing Germany's honor. His friend Albert Einstein was deeply disillusioned by this. He couldn't understand how someone could unquestionably accept German nationalism and militarism. And he likened Fritz's actions to giving an axe to a pathological criminal. During World War I, the various armies were stuck in trench warfare, with neither side gaining ground. To break this stalemate, Fritz proposed a rather sinister idea: what if we used heavier-than-air chlorine gas for an attack? And he embarked on the development of chlorine gas for use in trench warfare. On April 22, 1915, in Belgium, the French and German armies were locked in trench warfare. Fritz, in his military uniform, stood there with 6,000 chemical weapons lined up before him. He checked the wind's direction and signaled. A greenish mist was simultaneously released. Birds fell from the sky, and the grass changed color. The soldiers watched in bewilderment because no one had ever witnessed such an attack before. In just 10 minutes, 160 tons of chlorine gas covered the area, and thousands of lives were lost. However, Fritz had no qualms about using chemical weapons on people. Death is death, no matter the form. My actions will end the war sooner and save many lives. On the day he made ammonia synthesis possible, Fritz changed the future of humanity. But on this day, he also altered the course of humanity's future once again. This event led not only the German army but also the Allied forces to use chemical weapons in war. The casualties from chemical warfare in World War I were estimated at 100,000 deaths and 1 million wounded, including civilians. And Fritz became known as the father of chemical warfare. By the way, do you know about the scientist John Scott Haldane, who risked his life during this era? After the first ever gas attack by the German army, a scholar named John Scott Haldane from the United Kingdom traveled to the affected area to investigate. He wanted to know what the Germans had used on the battlefield. Upon examination, he noticed that the buttons of deceased soldiers had changed color, and he realized that this was due to chlorine gas. He began to think about countermeasures to protect soldiers in the field. Haldane was known for using himself as a test subject and conducted experiments to find effective solutions. He exposed himself to chlorine gas to determine if covering one's mouth with a certain substance would provide protection, repeating such experiments. For safety, he placed his daughter outside the room, instructing her to take him out immediately if he became incapacitated. Through these courageous experiments, Haldane contributed to the development of pads that could neutralize chlorine gas. He also played a role in the development of gas masks in 1915. Now, let's talk about Fritz Haber's wife, Clara. Clara Haber was also a talented scientist. She challenged the prevailing belief that women should stay at home and continued her research in chemistry. However, as Fritz's career advanced, her own career as a scientist was sidelined. Even her published papers, showcasing her talents, were often attributed to her husband. Clara was a pacifist, and she couldn't understand her husband's growing patriotism and militarism. She believed that science should provide humanity with a new future. In May 1915, Fritz returned home after the gas attacks, and by that time, he had become a national hero. The military recognized his efforts in using poison gas to repel the French army and promoted him. On May 2nd, Clara took Fritz's military pistol, went to the garden, and then shot herself in the chest, ending her own life. Hearing the gunshots, their son rushed to the scene, but Clara passed away in her son's arms. Fritz, who had taken sleeping pills, did not notice the gunshots. The following day, Fritz left once again, this time to release poison gas against the Russian army. Opinions on Fritz's actions vary. Some see him as ruthless, while others argue that he could only escape the sorrow caused by Clara's death by focusing on his immediate tasks. Even after World War I ended, he continued to support the development of chemical weapons in Germany. He also worked as a scientist in the supervisory organization for research, the Kaiser Wilhelm Society. However, as the 1930s unfolded and the Nazis rose to power, Jewish scientists became targets. The Kaiser Wilhelm Society received orders to dismiss all Jewish scientists. Karl Bosch, who had previously collaborated with Fritz on the synthesis of ammonia using the Haber-Bosch process, stood up. In a meeting with Hitler, Bosch warned that expelling Jewish scientists would be equivalent to expelling both physics and chemistry from Germany. Hitler responded by saying that if that were the case, Germany would go without physics and chemistry for the next 100 years. Fritz, the passionate German patriot, ultimately found himself rejected by Germany. He lost his homeland and fled. With the help of British scientists who had been his adversaries during World War I, he sought refuge in Cambridge. However, he was not well received there either. The next year, at the age of 65, Fritz passed away from heart failure. It was a lonely end. Despite his death, the technology he left behind lived on. Fritz's technology continued to be utilized by the Nazis. Ironically, the poison gas he developed was used in the Zyklon B gas chambers in concentration camps, resulting in the deaths of millions, including his relatives and friends. Fritz was both a genius who saved the world from famine and a scientist obsessed with the development of chemical weapons. Today, humanity continues to benefit from his contributions. How was it? If you found it interesting or informative, I would appreciate it if you could leave a like and a comment. And please subscribe my channel, it makes me happy and gives me energy to make next video. Thank you for watching.